When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them.
Tamanizai de nisi juicy, bivava kasara, zanaka ampilezana, avi tamani firen samihafa, ambanini lanitra, tafuetra tau Jerusalema. Vana numbaka ilai feo de nihuratra nanotuna, ni bestinamaro sadi, sangahenana, fafatra, satria nandra napino nampiasa, na fiteni manukana, mahazatra azi piano siari avi, talanzuna sigaga izi rehetra sadi, vakivava hue, fa si aviani Galilea avukua ve ireo miteni ireo.
Kaona nu anjuden santika tirairai avini fiteni manukana, na habe ansika, nisi aminsika avi Partia, Media, Elama, ari nisi punina avi Mesopotamia, nisi punina etu Judea, nisi kua ni Cappadocia, Ponto, Asia, Frisia, si Pamphylia, au kua ni avi Egypta, ambani fatetani, Sirena, ani Libia. Ari misi ni pivahini avi Roma, au ni Giusi, ari au hafa ferena pararca, ni favahana Giusi. Mbule misi kuo ni ave Creta si Arabia, canefeder in sika isi reu milas amni fintan sika avi, zava dehibe, atauni andrini manitra.
Desconcertados y perplejos se preguntaban, ¿qué quiere decir esto? Otros se burlaban y decían, lo que pasa es que están borrachos. Entonces Pedro, con los 11, se puso de pie y dio a voz en cuello: compatriotas judeos y todos ustedes que están en Jerusalén, déjenme explicarles lo que sucede. Presten atención a lo que les voy a decir. Estos no están borrachos, como suponen ustedes. Apenas son las 9 de la mañana. En realidad, lo que pasa es lo que anunció el profeta Joel. Sucederá que en los últimos días, dice Dios, derramé mi espíritu sobre todo el género humano. Los hijos y las hijas de ustedes profetizarán, tendrán visiones los jóvenes y sueños los ancianos.
Oui, sur mes servitures et sur mes servantes. Dans ces jours-là, je répandrai de mon esprit et ils prophétiseront. Je ferai paraître des prodiges en haut dans le ciel et des miracles en bas sur la terre. Du sang, du feu et une vapeur de fumée. Le soleil se changera en ténèbres et la lune en sang avant l'arrivée du jour du Seigneur, de ce jour grand et glorieux. Alors, quiconque invoquera le nom du Seigneur sera sauvé. Ceci est la parole du Seigneur.
Esta es la palabra de Dios.
This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I'll be honest, there's a great deal of craziness in this scene. There's so much going on, I don't really know where to fix my eyes, and it's difficult, as you just heard, to know where to fix your ears. There's so much going on, so much wonder and mystery and power, and it's hardly worship as I've known it. These sorts of things don't happen when I worship. What about you? When was the last time you were in worship and you heard the sound of a violent rushing wind from heaven? Most of the time when we worship, something that stirs us would be a microphone squelch or a baby who babbles at just an inopportune time, or someone snoring from the seventh pew, something like that. But no mighty rushing winds from heaven. That doesn't happen usually when we worship. Well, there was one time when I was in seminary, I was in chapel, we were worshiping, and Hewlett Glower happened to be preaching that day, actually. And in the middle of his sermon, the fire alarms began to go off. It made this awful sound. Our ears were bleeding. It was horrible. We had to evacuate the building. It turned out some young boy had pulled the fire alarm in the seminary. And we all reassembled. Of course, how do you restart worship after that, you know? Dr. Glower took the pulpit afterwards and he said, I know there has been a great number of wonderful sermons preached from this pulpit. But he said, no one's ever set the fire alarm off before. I've heard fire alarms, but no mighty rushing wind from heaven. And when was the last time you saw tongues of fire descend on people and rest upon their heads? It's been a while, huh? These sorts of things don't happen when we worship. I think the closest I came to something so unsettling and so powerful like this happened a few years ago when a small group of us, went to South Africa on a trip. Our group was worshiping in a very small village at the base of the Drakensberg Mountains, a beautiful setting and tribal people there. A small church, about 30 people. The pews of this church were lawn chairs, plastic lawn chairs that they set out every Sunday so that people could sit in them. They were mostly women and children. At the end of the service, one of the hosts, Cheryl Allen, walked up to me and said, the pastor is about to invite people to a time of prayer, and the pastor would be honored if you joined him in this time of prayer. I said, of course, I'm a pastor. I pray. It's what I do. And so, the pastor begins to speak in Zulu. None of us know what he's saying, and he invites people to come forward to pray. And 3 women rose from the other side of the room, one-room church, and they began walking up the center aisle for prayer. And Cheryl said, here you go, your time to go. All right, so I walk up, and the first woman comes forward, and Musa, the pastor, and I laid hands on her, and he began to pray in Zulu. I didn't know what he was saying, but it sounded really powerful and spiritual. And all of a sudden, Musa went, out! Out! Just like that. I mean, I thought we were praying, you know. I cracked my eye to see who he was telling to get out. And the woman began to tremble a bit. And I noticed on the front row, off to the side, Jerry Streeter and Joy Ort were trembling. Their shoulders were doing this, laughing, of course. And then it was a slow dawn on me. Oh, this isn't prayer, like, you know, middle class, nice prayer. This is an exorcism. I had never been in an exorcism before. I took exorcism in seminary. I made a C- in that class. I'm not real comfortable with this. Actually, that's a joke. I didn't know. What do you... When... yeah, this doesn't happen. And so Musa stops commanding this demon, and he taps me on the shoulder and says, your turn. I whimpered some timid little prayer that evaporated before it made it out of the church. The second woman came forward. Musa laid hands on her. He began to pray in Zulu. Out! Out! Third woman came forward. It was the same. It unsettled me. It's not how I typically pray. It's not the way we Westerners think about praying. Maybe there's a lesson in that for us. Maybe we could learn something about prayer from the way people around the world pray. But I will say to you, it was a powerful thing that day. That's about as crazy as my worship experiences have ever gotten. But even on that day, there was no violent rushing wind from heaven, and I didn't see one singular tongue on fire resting above anyone's head. I hope you'll excuse me this morning, though, if I don't even think the flaming tongues and roaring wind is the craziest part of this story. I think the most powerful part of the Pentecost story is that it happened at all. I mean, will you think with me this morning about the reasons Pentecost should not and would not ever happen? Think with me about it. Jesus had told these people to wait in Jerusalem, to wait on some power. And they did it. I wouldn't have done it. I bet we would have had a hard time doing it if Jesus said, just hang out here and wait on some power. I don't like to wait on power because that means power is not mine to control. I like to create power. I probably would have started a program. We probably would have rethought some curriculum or tried to rebrand as a church. I'm surprised in Jerusalem they didn't try to get out in front of the Spirit and make things happen. But they didn't. They did what they were told and they waited, and power came. And the Spirit came. And then there's the whole language thing. Did you hear that? These Jews had gathered from all over the inhabited world into Jerusalem for Pentecost. Pentecost, we tend to forget this, was a Jewish holiday before it was a Christian holiday. Pentecost was an annual celebration every year, about 50 days after Passover, to celebrate the wheat harvest. It was a time of Thanksgiving. It would sort of be synonymous with our Thanksgiving season. And it was also in that time that the people of Israel remembered the covenant that was given to them in Sinai. They recovenanted themselves to keep their agreement with Yahweh and be the sort of people that Yahweh asked them to be. Pentecost was a high and holy Jewish holiday. And so Jews from all over the inhabited world had come to Jerusalem, and they all spoke different languages. Do you know how difficult and disorienting and confusing that can be? There is a large cotton gin in Caldwell, Arkansas, near where I grew up. My grandpa, as he started stepping into retirement, began working in the office of this cotton gin every fall and winter as they were processing the cotton. He worked the office. And so I would go up to visit him on long nights just to be with him. It was also in the harvest time that workers from Mexico came up and helped out with the harvest. They spoke Spanish and had very, very, very little broken English. They would try to talk to my grandpa. The cotton gin is buzzing in the background. It's loud. My grandpa's hard of hearing on a clear day. And these people are speaking broken English. It was a comedy of errors in that room. My papa thought that if he just slowed his speech and raised his voice, that it would happen. And so he's shouting at them. The cotton gin's roaring. He can't hear them. They can't understand each other. It was horrible. You can't just raise your voice. You can't transcend a linguistic difference and communicate. It just doesn't happen. Communication is difficult when you speak the same language. Right, husbands and wives? Right, anyone who's ever shopped for groceries off a list someone else made? Right? It's hard to I'm not talking about small talk. I'm talking about eternal things. It's hard to communicate when you speak the same language. Pentecost shouldn't have happened. This can't happen. And these people were from different nations. Do you know how difficult that is? To try to have a conversation with someone who comes from a different context and has different national interests. What would have happened in this group if someone had said, my nation's interests take priority? You know, when one person stands in a group of people and says, my interests come first, we would say that's selfish. But we have a habit of saying our nation's interests come first. And in some ways, that's a virtue. Can you imagine what would have happened at Pentecost had they said that? These people from all these nations? When we lose sight of something cosmic, when we lose sight of a kingdom of God that's comprised of all people and all nations and all tribes and all tongues, when we lose sight of that, all we're left with are our little tribes at war with each other. Pentecost shouldn't have happened. They speak different languages. They're from different nations. And those are just the differences that we know about. Who knows how else they were different and varied on that day? Surely there was some senior in the crowd that day who said, I just don't get the new choruses. I wish we wouldn't sing the new stuff, 7 words, 40 times. I wish we just stuck to the old stuff. If it was good enough for Moses, it should be good enough for us. Surely someone said that day. Surely someone said, if they play that dang organ one more time, I'm out of here. The organ. Surely someone said, if Peter talks about the Gentiles one more time, I'm out. And surely someone said, if Peter doesn't talk about justice for the Gentiles today, in this sermon, I'm out. Is there any limit to how diverse and varied any singular church can be on any given day? Pentecost should not have happened. And then at the beginning of the story, it might be the greatest miracle of all. Did you hear it? The story starts when Luke says they were all together in one place. Do you know how hard that is? They were all together. Somehow, amidst all the children's schedules and the work and the trips and the rest and the life, somehow, some way, they found a way to be together. They were all together in one place. This wasn't some private, ecstatic, spiritual experience. This was a communal, corporate, mysterious experience. They were all together in one place, Jews from all over the world speaking all of these different languages. Pentecost shouldn't have happened. This sort of stuff cannot happen. And it happened. It happened because of the power of the Spirit of God. It happened in the same way virgin births happen. It happened in the same way rising from the dead happens. A committee didn't plan it. A task force didn't dream it. A program didn't create it. The church didn't conjure this up. This conjured the church up. And it was powerful and it was bewildering because they hadn't seen it as often as we've seen it, any more than we've seen it. That's what the Spirit does in the book of Acts from beginning to end. The Spirit empowers weak things that otherwise wouldn't be. And it bewilders people because it makes possible what seemed impossible. The Spirit acts like wind and fire. It cannot be contained. It cannot be measured. It breaks out and it breaks through and it tears down anything and everything that is in its path. The Spirit that day broke through the varied contexts, the varied experiences, moved through multiple languages and varied perspectives, and it created very real community. Real community, surprising community, where life is shared. Brothers and sisters, I say to you today that real Christian community is a gift from God. We cannot create it. I know because I've tried it. Just because you put 2 people in the same room doesn't mean you create community. You may create a fight. Blood on the ceiling. Putting 2 people in the same room and they become community, that is a gift of the Spirit. You can put people in close proximity. You can say, get near each other. Y'all sit together and pretend like you like each other. But oftentimes that just creates strangers in close proximity. Community, real community, is more than the sum total of its parts because it has to do with energy between us. Not just us, but the energy between us. And we can't create that on our own. That is a gift from God. It was that day diversity in unity and unity in diversity. Notice that they didn't all speak the same language. That's how I read it when I was a child. I thought they all spoke some heavenly language. That's not it. It's not that they all spoke the same language. It's that they all heard the same message in their different languages. There is diversity here. Beautiful, powerful, unsettling diversity. And yet there is unity because they are all hearing the good news of Jesus. Diversity has become something of a buzzword in our day. Everyone's talking about it. But it's peanut butter and jelly to talk about diversity, and it's caviar to actually do it. It's not as easy as the words imply. And yet I'm glad we're talking about it because we've too long had too little of it. The church wasn't born when God gathered together a group of homogeneous people. The church was born when God gathered together about as diverse a group of people as you could ever imagine. And as He brought them together, empowered them and created real Christian community. While diversity isn't an end unto itself, it is a necessary means for us to ever arrive at something like a kingdom of God, which is comprised of people from all nations and tribes and tongues. Diversity is a safeguard against our creating God in our own image. When everyone at the table, hear me brothers and sisters, when everyone at the table looks like me and thinks like me and has had my life's experiences, it becomes really, really easy for me to think that God looks like me and thinks like me and has had my life's experiences. This is why we need women to preach the gospel of Jesus. Because part of me thinks we haven't heard the whole story because the women haven't been given the opportunity to tell it. Women need to be at the table. It's why we need people of color at the table. It's why we need the poor at the table. It's why we need the elderly at the table. It's why we need the young at the table. It's why we need all people. And we need our all to be the biggest ALL it can be. Because other people can see my idols easier than I can. Other people can see my idols easier than I can. We need diversity. Diversity enriches our perspectives. It gives us a richer view of the truth. Here's how I imagine it. I imagine us all living in an apartment complex where I have my apartment and you have your apartment and you have your apartment and all that. And I look out my window onto whatever it is we're looking at. God, reality, the world, our culture, an issue. And I look out my apartment window and I see it from that perspective and it's true. I say that's reality. But you look out through your apartment window, your experiences, your values and virtues, what you know of God. And you see it from a different angle. You see it from a different floor of the building. And it's not that I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. Maybe it is that I'm right. That could be an option. It may just be that it's hard. Our brains are so stinking small. And when we put our views together, when we put our windows together, we just see more of it than we could on our own. The truth becomes more of a capital T truth than a little t truth. But that only happens when we combine our windows, when we put our eyes together, and the truth becomes a richer, fuller experience. Diversity extends the reach of the church. It authenticates the gospel message. If the Spirit is the only explanation for how people can hold it together, maybe the Spirit is the explanation. Too many churches can be explained in some other way. I say to you, brothers and sisters, we do not need the Spirit of God for a political action committee. We don't need the Spirit of God for a book club. We don't need the Spirit of God for a Rotary or Kiwanis. Not that any of those things are bad or wrong, but we can explain those in some other way. We do need the Spirit of God for the church. In fact, we are not the church without it. Common affinity or a common background or common ideology does not a church make. The one thing that made Pentecost possible outweighed the 1,000 things that made it impossible. And the people couldn't explain it. They were bewildered. The Spirit fell and the wind blew and the flaming tongues descended and the church was born. And all the people heard the gospel in their heart language. They were many and they were one. They were one and they were many. They were diverse and they were unified. They were unified and they were diverse. And the crowd said, "What does this mean?" And some old codger in the back said, "They're drunk. That's all it is. They're drunk. They had too much wine." Only explanation. I wonder how you would answer that question. What does this mean? I wonder how you would answer that question today. Second Baptist Church, Pentecost 2019. What does this mean? I don't know. But I would venture to say that it might mean that the church has more to do with wind and fire than walls. Have you ever seen what wind and fire can do to walls? Walls of clay and wood, of course, but walls of language and ethnicity? Walls of nationality and race? Walls of ideology and class? Walls of geography and zip code? Walls of gender and sexuality? Walls of religion and dogma? We do not lack for walls today. Lord knows we do not lack for walls. Old walls, thick walls, impenetrable walls, armored walls, and those walls make sense of our existence. Most organizations that I know were born about the time the walls go up. But the church was born at precisely the moment that the walls fell down. And to the extent that the Spirit is alive in the church today, to the extent that the Spirit is still descending and abiding, the walls are still falling down. May it be so with us, Spirit of God. And all the Pentecost people said,